So I sold the house while my son and his wife were in Sedona celebrating their anniversary. They came home to an empty driveway, a lockbox on the door, and a voicemail from my real estate attorney. I was already 3 states away, sitting on the balcony of my new apartment with a glass of sweet tea, watching the sun go down over the water. And I felt, for the first time in 2 years, like myself again. Let me go back to the beginning. My name is Gloria. I'm 68 years old. I taught 4th grade in Columbus, Ohio for 31 years, which means I have more patience than most people will ever develop in a lifetime, and I know exactly when someone is trying to manage me. My husband, Frank, passed away in the spring of 2022. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel the way it always is. We'd been married 42 years. We met at a church picnic in 1980. He spilled lemonade on my yellow dress and apologized for 10 minutes straight, and we built a life together that I was proud of. A brick ranch house in Westerville, a vegetable garden in the backyard, 2 kids, my son Aaron, who lives in Phoenix with his wife Melissa and their 2 children, and my daughter Lena, who teaches nursing at a community college in Knoxville. After Frank died, I stayed in the house alone for about 8 months. I was managing. I really was. I had my routines. Coffee at 6, walk at 7. I'd started volunteering at the school library on Thursdays. My neighbor Carol checked on me. I was sad. I was deeply, hollowly sad, but I was not falling apart. Then Aaron called. He called on a Sunday evening in December, and his voice had that particular careful quality it gets when he's been rehearsing what he wants to say. "Mom," he said, "Melissa and I have been talking. We really think you should come out here, to Phoenix. We have the space. The kids would love having you close. And we just feel better knowing you weren't alone in that house all winter." I told him I'd think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it for 3 weeks. The house was big for one person. The winters were hard. My niece had started making opinions known on the stairs. Lena was too far, and her apartment was tiny. And if I'm being honest, I missed being needed. I missed having people around me. Frank and I had always been the kind of couple who kept an open house. Dinner on Sundays, cousins showing up unannounced, noise. So I said yes. I told my neighbor Carol I was going to try it for 6 months and see how it went. I called Aaron back and said I'd come in February, after I got a few things sorted. He sounded genuinely happy. Melissa got on the phone and said she was already setting up the guest room. "We want you to be comfortable," she said. "This is your home too." I should have written that down, because it didn't stay true for very long. The house in Phoenix was beautiful. 4 bedrooms, a pool in the back, a kitchen that would make you want to cook. Melissa is an interior designer. She does it freelance, and the whole place looked like something out of a magazine. Clean lines, neutral colors, everything coordinated. My room was the one at the end of the hall, past the kids' rooms. It had its own bathroom, which I appreciated. It was painted a soft gray-blue, and there was a reading chair by the window. It was nice. I told Melissa it was lovely, and I meant it. The first few weeks were good. I got to know my grandchildren better. Marcus, who is 11 and obsessed with anything that flies, and little Cora, who is 8 and has a way of looking at you that makes you feel fully seen. Those 2 were the best part of every single day. I cooked dinner twice a week. I did my own laundry. I tried to stay out of the way. I was not there to be a burden. I understood that they had their routines, their rhythms, and I was a guest in that rhythm. But somewhere around month 2, things started shifting. Small things. The way Melissa would come into the kitchen while I was cooking and reorganize the utensils without saying anything. The way Aaron would ask, very gently, if I'd remember to take my blood pressure medication, as if I hadn't been managing my own health for decades. The family calendar on the refrigerator, color-coded by person, and my name was not on it. I told myself I was being too sensitive. Adjusting is hard. Everyone adjusts. Then came the afternoon in April. I'd been sitting in the family room reading, and Melissa came in with her laptop and sat at the dining table to work. I could hear her on a call. She used her earbuds so I couldn't hear the other person, only her side. I wasn't trying to listen. I was reading, but the house was quiet and voices carry. "She's fine," Melissa said. "She's getting settled. It's a lot, you know? It's a lot of adjustment. And she has so many things. I don't know where she thinks all of it is going to live permanently." A pause. "I know. Aaron keeps saying give it time. But I've been giving it time. And honestly, I thought it would be easier than this. I love her. I do. But she's always there. I walk into every room and she's there." I put my book down. I looked at the ceiling. I didn't move. I am not a woman who cries easily. I taught elementary school for 3 decades. I sat with Frank through 8 months of treatment. I have kept myself together through things that would crack other people open. But sitting in that chair, listening to my daughter-in-law describe me as a thing taking up too much space, I felt something go very quiet inside me. I stood up. I went to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. That night at dinner, I smiled and passed the salad and asked Marcus about the rocket he was building for the science fair. I was pleasant. I was fine. But in my chest, something had shifted, and I couldn't shift it back. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention in a different way, not suspiciously. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't looking for things to be wrong, but once you start really listening, you hear things you can't unhear. Aaron mentioned twice that I should think about simplifying my finances, that it might be a good idea to consolidate things for easier management. He said it the way you say something you said before in your head many times, casually, but with intention underneath. The second time, I asked him what he meant by consolidate. He said it would just be easier if someone could have an overview, help me manage things. He'd talked to a financial advisor, he said. His financial advisor. I nodded. I said I'd think about it. And then I called my own attorney. My attorney is a woman named Patricia, not a character, a real person I've trusted since I sold my mother's estate in 2015. I called her from my car, parked outside a Safeway, because I didn't want to make the call inside the house. I told her what Aaron had said. I told her about the house in Westerville, which was still in my name, which I had not sold before moving, because I wasn't ready to let go of it. I told her I wanted to understand exactly what I owned, exactly what I owed, and exactly what my options were. She listened without interrupting. "Gloria," she said when I finished, "the house is yours. Every account is yours. Your husband's life insurance payout is yours. Nobody can consolidate anything without your explicit written consent. Not your son, not his advisor, not anyone." "I know that," I said. "I just needed to hear you say it. Have you thought about what you want to do?" I looked out the windshield at the Safeway parking lot. A woman was loading groceries into her trunk. A kid was sitting on a cart, spinning. The sun was absolutely brutal out there, the way it is in Phoenix in May. "I've started thinking," I said. "I didn't make any decisions that day. That's not how I work." Frank always said I was the kind of person who could hold a decision in my hands for weeks, turning it over, looking at it from every angle, and then one morning I'd just know. He was right. That's exactly how I work. What I did do was start organizing, not obviously, not in a way anyone would notice. I went through my things in my room and I made a list of what I actually wanted to keep, what could be donated, what had sentimental value I wasn't willing to part with. I had 2 large bins under the bed that Melissa had asked me to try to consolidate when I first arrived, and I quietly went through them over several evenings while everyone else was watching TV. I called Carol back in Westerville. I told her I might need her to help me arrange something with the house, and she said, "Whenever you're ready, honey, I'm here." I looked at senior living communities online, not the ones that look like hospitals. I was looking for something specific. Independent living, a real apartment, a real kitchen, activities if I wanted them, and solitude if I didn't. I found a community in Sarasota, Florida, that a colleague from school had moved to 2 years ago. She'd sent me pictures once. Beautiful courtyard, a little library, a pool that didn't belong to someone else's house. I called her. We talked for 2 hours. She told me she'd never been happier. The following week, Melissa planned a long weekend trip to Sedona for her and Aaron's anniversary. 4th of July weekend. They'd been talking about it for months. They arranged for the kids to stay with Melissa's parents, who live 40 minutes away. I told them to have a wonderful time. I went about my morning the same as always. Coffee at 6. Walk at 7. But when I got back, I called Patricia. I told her I was ready to list the Westerville house. I told her the timeline I was thinking. She said she could have everything moving within the week. I also called the community in Sarasota. They had a 2-bedroom unit available on the 3rd floor. Corner unit. View of the courtyard and, in the distance, a sliver of water. The lease was month to month for the first 6 months. I said I'd take it. What followed was the most purposeful 2 weeks of my life. I arranged movers for my things and storage back in Ohio. I coordinated with Carol to let the real estate agents do their walkthrough. The Westerville house sold in 9 days. The market was strong, my house was well maintained, and I had priced it right because Patricia told me to trust her, and I did. I booked my flights. I shipped 3 boxes to the new address in Sarasota. I packed my car with what mattered most: Frank's watch, the quilt my mother made, my good cast iron skillet, the photo albums, and 4 boxes of books. I left Phoenix on a Thursday morning. I left a card on the kitchen counter for Aaron. I want to be clear. I did not leave in anger. I left in clarity. The card said that I loved him, that I was grateful for the time I'd spent with him and his family, that the kids had given me joy I hadn't expected, and that I had decided it was time for me to build my own life again. I told him the house in Westerville had sold, that my finances were in order, and that Patricia would be handling any remaining correspondence. I told him where I was going. I left my new phone number. I did not apologize for any of it. Aaron called that evening. I answered. He was upset in the way people get when they've been caught doing something they didn't fully admit to themselves they were doing. He said he didn't understand. He said I hadn't talked to him. He said he thought I was happy there. He said the word blindsided 3 times. I let him finish, and then I said, Aaron, I heard Melissa's conversation in April. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm not angry. But I understood from that moment that the arrangement wasn't working the way anyone hoped, and rather than make everyone uncomfortable, I decided to make a different choice. Silence. The house money is mine, I said. My savings are mine. I have never asked you for anything financial, and I never plan to. I need you to understand that what I've done is not a punishment. It's a decision, my decision. And I'm at peace with it. He didn't really have anywhere to go with that. He asked if we could still talk. I said, of course. I told him to bring the kids to Florida in the fall. I meant it. The apartment in Sarasota is on the 3rd floor, like I said. The windows face east, so I get the morning light. I have my own kitchen, my good skillet, my books lined up on shelves I chose. My name across the hall is a retired school principal named Dot. We figured out within the first week that we'd both been teachers. We both like gin rummy, and we both have opinions about proper pie crust. On Thursday mornings, I volunteer at the county library's reading program. Marcus called me the 2nd week I was here. He said, Grandma, is your new place cool? I told him it had a pool and a courtyard and a library, and I could see water from my balcony. He said, okay, that's actually really cool. I laughed out loud, the real kind. Cora sent me a card. She still writes letters, my girl, with a drawing of what I can only describe as a very enthusiastic sun over a body of water. She wrote inside, I miss you, Grandma, but I am glad you have your own house. She is 8 years old and she understood it perfectly. I have not spoken with Melissa directly since I left. I don't say that with bitterness. Someday we may get there. People need time to sit with what they've done. Not dramatically, not with punishment, but just time. I have learned, at 68, that some things can only resolve themselves slowly, and forcing a conversation before both people are ready just creates more damage. Aaron and I talk on Sundays now. We keep it light. We are finding our way back to each other without the weight of the living arrangement between us. He has not mentioned the financial advisor again. I want to say something directly. because I've thought about this a lot since I moved. There is a particular loneliness that comes with being older and feeling like you've become a problem to be managed. Like your presence needs to be accommodated rather than welcomed. Like your opinions are charming, the way a child's are charming. Sweet, but not really relevant to the decisions being made. I knew that feeling was coming the day I heard Melissa's voice through the quiet house, and I knew that if I stayed, I would slowly stop being myself and start being a version of myself that took up less room. I was not willing to do that. Frank would not have wanted me to do that. I spent 42 years building a life with someone, and then I spent 2 years learning how to rebuild one without him. I don't need to live inside my son's house to matter to him. I don't need to fold myself small to deserve a place in this family. I just need to know, in my own bones, in my own home, in my own kitchen, that I am still the woman I always was. I'm still here. I'm still whole. And the sweet tea this evening, with the sun going down and the water doing whatever water does at this hour, pink and gold and impossibly calm, tastes exactly right. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in a complicated way. Just in the plain, honest way you do when you're sitting somewhere quiet and you finally have enough distance to see the whole shape of something. What Melissa said on that phone call wasn't the cause of everything that followed. That's what people might assume, that one careless conversation broke something and I reacted. But it's more layered than that. What she said was just the moment I finally heard out loud what had been quietly building for months. The cause was much earlier. It was the moment I agreed to fold my life into someone else's house without first making sure I had somewhere of my own to land. I don't say that to blame myself. I say it because it's true, and I've always believed that honest reckoning, the kind where you look at your own choices without flinching, is the only kind that actually helps you grow. I made a decision from grief and loneliness, and those are real and valid reasons, but they weren't enough of a foundation. And because the foundation wasn't solid, everything that got built on top of it was slightly off balance from the start. What I did next, calling Patricia, making the plan, leaving on my own terms, that was the effect of something I'd been learning my whole life. 31 years in a classroom will teach you things no one puts in a curriculum. It teaches you that dignity is not something other people grant you. It's something you hold onto yourself or you don't. And the moment you notice you've been setting it down quietly in small increments to make other people more comfortable, that's the moment you have to make a choice. I chose to pick it back up. I think about Aaron a lot. He's not a villain in this story, and I want to be clear about that. He's a man who loves his mother and also loves his wife, and also, somewhere in the confusion of managing both, stopped seeing me as a person with my own interior life and started seeing me as a situation. That happens. It happens in families all the time, and it doesn't make someone bad. It makes them human and a little thoughtless. The consequence of being thoughtless with someone who has spent 68 years building a self is that eventually that person stops waiting for you to notice and simply acts. I acted. And here's what I know now that I didn't fully trust then. The decision to reclaim your own life is not a selfish one. It is, in fact, one of the most generous things you can do. For yourself, yes, but also for the people around you. Because a person who is diminished, who has slowly stopped taking up the space they're entitled to, is not easier to love. They're just quieter. And quiet resentment, quiet shrinking, quiet disappearance. None of that is good for anyone. Cora understood it, 8 years old, and she wrote in her letter, "I am glad you have your own house." She didn't need to be explained the philosophy of it. She just knew, the way children sometimes know things before adults talk themselves out of knowing, that a grandmother who has her own home, her own kitchen, her own good morning, that grandmother is more herself, and more herself means more present, more real, more there in the ways that actually matter. The water outside my window tonight is doing that thing it does just before dark, when the light goes sideways and everything turns a color that doesn't have a name. I have my tea. I have my books. I have my cast iron skillet and my mother's quilt, and the quiet that belongs entirely to me. That's not an ending. That's just where I am right now. And right now is enough.